All right, we'll call this general committee meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. We start our meetings with the following land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. We'll now take 30 seconds to reflect. Please stand for the singing of the national anthem. And the Council for the City of Peterborough recognizes the principles contained in our Constitution and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. All right, adoption of minutes of May 1st, May 8th, 2023, moved by Councillor Baldwin. Any comments or questions, errors or omissions? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. Yeah, take your time. Okay, Councillor Purnell's a yes, and Councillor Breck's just getting inside. And that is carried. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Clerk, any disclosure of pecuniary interest this evening?
Mr. Chair, I have Councillors Duguay and Parnell.
Okay, Councillor Parnell. Yeah.
Thinking. Mr. Chair, I do need to declare on item 8, 11A 550 Braidwood Avenue. It's a planning matter. So Councillor Rial will chair that part of the meeting on my behalf. My son does own a home within 120 meters of the subject property.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duguay.
Thank you, Chairman Beamer. I will be declaring conflicts on items 11B, a rezoning application pertaining to 5359 Leahy's Lane, and secondly, a rezoning application pertaining to 376 Rubich Street. As a family member is representing both applications this evening.
Great, thank you. Great, thank you, everyone. All right, we do have 3 items coming out of closed session this evening. Jackson Avenue, that council approved the recommendation outlined in report CLSR S23-009 dated June 5th, 2023 of the Commissioner of Corporate and Legislative Services as follows. A, that the properties known municipally as Part 45R11870 and part of the lane located to the south of 34 Jackson Avenue be declared surplus to the city's requirements. B, that the notice requirements of bylaw 95-62 be waived. C, that respecting the disposition of Part 2 and part of the lane shown on Plan 98, location to the south of 34 Jackson Avenue, staff be authorized to proceed as outlined in report CLSRS 23-009 dated June 5th, 2023 of the Commissioner of Corporate and Legislative Services. Moved by Councillor Baldwin. Any comments or questions? All right, we'll take a vote. Councillor Purnell, a yes. Councillor Purnell's a yes. And that is carried. Next closed session report, Lansdowne Street and Elmer Street, that council approved the recommendation outlined in report CLSR 23-101 dated June 5th, 2023 of the Commissioner of Corporate and Legislative Services as follows. That respecting the properties known municipally as 212 Lansdowne Street West and 135 Lansdowne Street South,
amount of time, going through a whole series of candidates, asking difficult and penetrating questions. So to make sure that we got the broad scope of those individuals that were interested in being Peterborough's next Chief Administrative Officer. I think it bodes well for a community where there was such an interest to assume this job. That says a lot about the community of Peterborough, but more importantly too, it says a lot about the reputation of the organization, the men and women who work for the city of Peterborough each and every day. Through that process, we came to a conclusion. We have selected Infrastructure Commissioner Jasper Reyna to be our next Chief Administrative Officer. Mr. Reyna brings a wealth of experience to the city of Peterborough. He had a sterling career with City of Mississauga, City of Brampton, and I think it's about his year anniversary, I believe, with the City of Peterborough. So that says a lot about the influence Mr. Reyna has during the 12 months that he's been with us. Again, it says a lot about this community, the quality of individuals that applied for this position. It bodes well for the future of this community, and it bodes well for the leadership of Mr. Reyna. So, Mr. Reyna, on behalf of all the members of council, and indeed the 83,000 people that make up the great city of Peterborough, we want to welcome you to this new position, and we look forward to your leadership over a very long period of time to make sure that all of us work together to achieve Peterborough's potential, which we believe is there, and you will help us move forward. So thank you very much. Chair, I think later on we do an official vote at a special council meeting.
It's special tonight to, absolutely.
And Mr. Reyna, may it at that time, maybe you'd like to say a few words, or do you want to say a few words right now? It's your choice, sir.
Sure, I will not miss the chance, Mr. Mayor. You know that due to certain things, I can't speak too much, but all I will say that it's a great honor and privilege to lead a very, very hardworking and professional team here. And also, I thank Mayor Leal and whole council for entrusting me. Generally people say that this is a hot seat. For me, it's an extremely value-creating seat. And thanks for your faith in me. And I can assure you that I won't let you down. And that's the reason I'm sitting here on this chair today. And I'm taking the role tomorrow. I have a lot to say, but today I just want to thank you, and I will not hesitate to tell you that I will do the best possible within my limits. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Richard Freeman, who held the deck with utmost dedication and professionalism. So thank you to Richard too. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reyna. So we will take a vote now and then ratify it at special closed in an hour and a half or so. So moved by Mayor Leal, and we'll take a vote. And that is carried. So congratulations, Commissioner Reyna, and welcome. Okay, so we'll move to our consent agenda. Committee members, let me know if you'd like to speak to any of the following items. 12A1, new official plan amendment analysis. Anyone wishing to speak to that? Councillor Duguay. 12A2, pre-commitment of funds in award, Armour Road reconstruction and resurfacing. Anyone wishing to speak to that? Councillor Riel. 12A3, feasibility of a new or temporary traffic signals at the intersection of Brayley and Cherry Hill. Anyone wishing to speak to that? Councillor Vasiliadis and Mayor Leal. And 12A4, approval of citywide limit reduction in school areas and implementation of community safety zones. Anyone wishing to speak to that? Councillor Riel. All right, so nothing up for consent this evening, so we'll move to our public meeting. We do have 3 items. Councillor Purnell's the Chair of Planning. She's declared. I will pass it over to Vice Chair of Planning, Councillor Riel. Councillor Riel.
Thank you very much. This is a public meeting under the Planning Act. Our first one up is the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 550 Braidwood Avenue, report IPSPL 23-0117. And I guess we have a staff report. Is that Mr. Appleby, or are you going to do that?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of council. So tonight we're here to review and consider a application for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment at 550 Braidwood Avenue, which is located just south of Lansdowne Street along Monaghan Road to the west side of the site, and Braidwood Avenue to the south end of the site. And then along the north, you see on the image there some houses that back onto the site along Edison Avenue. Just a different view of the site here. The property currently has an industrial building on the east portion, and there is a undeveloped portion to the west, as it is today, and has been used over the years as a soccer pitch and for recreation purposes, but still privately owned. Just a look from the street across the pitch towards the building, looking east. And then again from Braidwood Avenue looking north. Property is owned by Global Point Logistics, Inc., and the applicant is Kent Randall, who is here and we'll speak to it in a little bit. Property itself is about 10 acres in size, just over 4 hectares. Has considerable frontage along both Monaghan Road and Braidwood Avenue. As I said, the current use right now on the eastern portion of the property is warehousing. There's a daycare in there, self-storage facility, and a warehouse. The proposed use will encompass the western portion of the property, the portion that is undeveloped right now. And the applicant is proposing to develop a total of 77 residential units on the property. The existing industrial building will remain and won't be touched through this work. In order to facilitate the development, there's an amendment to the official plan that's required. When this application first came in, it was actually deemed complete under the old official plan, pre-April 2023. And so consequently, it was evaluated under that plan. However, moving forward, looking at the new official plan, basically the same amendment that would have been required to the old official plan is also required to the new official plan. And so we're here tonight considering an amendment to the new official plan in terms of flipping the property from an employment designation to a neighborhood designation and a residential use for the western half of the property. From a zoning perspective, sorry, see something blocking the screen here, if I can get rid of that. There. From a zoning perspective, the applicant is requesting to amend the western portion of the site from its current industrial zone to an R5 residential zone, and to add in site-specific exceptions to basically make this development work. And so I've kind of shown on the screen there what those exceptions are and where they apply. So looking at imposing a minimum 3-meter open space strip along the north lot line where those houses along Edison Avenue back onto the site. Looking at a 9-meter setback from what will be a newly created lot line through a severance process to come between this residential piece and that existing industrial building. We would have vehicular access on both Monaghan Road and Braidwood Avenue. And on the screen there, you can see a bit of a breakdown of the types of units that would be proposed. So there's, 2-bedroom units, accessible 2-bedroom units, loft units, some 3-bedroom units as well in varying sizes. Just an image of the site looking kind of north along Monaghan Road. Then another image at it looking west from Braidwood Avenue. In terms of policy, this application was reviewed under the current PPS and the current growth plan. And we looked at it under both the old official plan and the new official plan. When the province, excuse me, approved the new official plan, they put a transition policy in there to say that if an application was deemed complete while the previous plan was in effect, then it could continue to be reviewed and processed under that plan. And so that was what we did with this site. And in general sense, from our perspective, this infill development actually fits quite well with all three documents. It's thank you. Utilizing existing services, has good access to transit, shopping, other community services. It fits in quite nicely. Notice was circulated in accordance with the act, and there was a virtual neighborhood open house held. Some of the comments that we had received from area residents spoke to sort of the adequacy of on-site amenities. The fact when you look at that kind of concept sketch, there's a lot of parking area and maybe not a park right on site. Some questions around the affordability of the units being proposed, whether there's opportunity to reduce parking further on the site, and concerns around privacy for neighboring residents, particularly the ones along Edison Avenue who back onto the site. So I'll just comment on those a little bit here for a minute. So in terms of on-site amenity space, when we look at applications like this, we do look at sort of the proximity to parks and other recreation opportunities. This site, I would suggest, is well positioned. It has several parks within about 500 meters of the site, which is a typical, from a planning perspective, a typical 5-minute walking distance. You've got the Crawford Trail that's only about 170 meters away, which can connect throughout the community. So it's really quite well positioned, actually. In terms of the affordability, I'll perhaps leave that to the applicant to speak to what their plans are. My understanding is that they're market units, but with a variety of unit sizes, that'll bring on a variety of price points. In terms of the parking is being reduced, and a parking study was produced to sort of rationalize the 1.5 spaces that they were landed on and reviewed with our transportation staff, and staff is supportive of the reduction that was put forward. And in terms of privacy for the neighbors, this project, the next step for this project, if approved tonight and ratified in 2 weeks, will be to go through a site plan approval process, which would allow us to look at things like landscaping and fencing and so forth. So that type of comment could be addressed at that stage. With respect to the official plan, what's being recommended is that the Schedule A of the new official plan be changed to flip this from an employment district to a neighborhood district. The property itself is really kind of an isolated island of employment. It's something from many years gone by, I would say, and it's completely surrounded by residential on 3 sides as it is, and so this is kind of, I'm going to say, kind of squaring off the employment designation at Monaghan Road. Similar change would happen on Schedule B to flip it from an employment to a residential designation. And then from a zoning perspective, the west portion of the property would go from an M 3.1 industrial district to an R5 with the exceptions that I had shown on the screen before and are on the screen now. And then the east half would retain the industrial zoning with exceptions to basically recognize that the property is shrinking and to ensure that it still meets, zoning regulations for the new property. It's just an image kind of showing how that will look.
The presentation, always concerned when you're converting some commercial to residential, but in this case, it makes a lot of sense to where it's located. The question that I have though, there's $97,000 in change in education development charges. What are those used for? And who holds those funds?
Through the chair to Councillor Hake, I'll be honest, I would probably need to touch base with our finance folks and our building folks who end up collecting those at the time of building permit. But I'm not sure if Mr. Freeman perhaps could speak to that a little bit more better than I can.
Mr. Chairman, the education development charges are held actually by the Board of Ed. They are not held by the city. We collect them temporarily and then pass along the funds to the school board for their development purposes.
Thank you.
I have Mayor Leo.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and through you to Brad. Brad, thanks for an extensive report here. I think this is a phenomenal development that's going forward in that property. Know it well. Kind of grew up not too far from that side, along with some other members of council that grew up in that immediate area. My question is, based on the vacancy rate of 1.1%.
I don't understand politics, but I do work in construction and I have for 12 years, so I understand money talks. And it sounds like you guys have your mind made up. My major concern is I solely bought that house for the reason there was nothing directly behind me and I have 2 young children. So I heard you bring up the privacy fence. I would prefer if there was some kind of in writing there was going to be a fence, because even though there's 3 meters of separation, you're building a 4-story building so they can look directly into my backyard, as well as maybe trees. I'd just like to know certain things that are going to affect, because like your backyard is your serenity as far as I'm concerned. Everyone else in the area isn't really affected by it. Like on Braidwood, you're looking out your front window and seeing it, but your backyard is where you go to relax. So, and my kids to play. So I'd just like to know like maybe where the dumpsters are going to be located as well, so that my backyard doesn't smell like garbage, or the amount of trees and how big the trees are going to be when they go in, so I don't have to wait 10 years for the trees to hide it. The fence, I just want to make sure that my backyard isn't just taken from me, essentially. So those are the concerns I have.
Mr. Appleby, could you give Mr. Chamberlain some comfort on some of the questions that he raised?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. So indeed, like through the site plan process, that is the process that we would go through to kind of, look at the placement, the height of fences, all the landscaping. That's typically when that happens. The garbage location would be dealt with through that. In terms of public notice, it's not, it's the type of process that normally only the immediate neighbors would necessarily receive a notice of. But if you back onto it, then typically you would get circulated a copy of the plan kind of showing what the concept is, where those types of items would be located. It would be more than that, more detailed than that.
Okay.
Yeah, and we would welcome any comments at that point. And I know the applicants here listening to the concerns, and we've heard the concerns previously through the process to date, and so they're certainly aware as well as to kind of what needs to be addressed, I think.
Okay.
Question, Mr. Chamberlain?
No, that's pretty much it. Yeah, it's just the 5 houses, I believe, that backyards are affected by it. So I just wanted to make sure that there's, something being done about it. But thank you for your time.
Thanks for coming.
Mr.
tonight.
Chairman, may I ask a question of Mr. Chamberlain?
Absolutely, Councillor Duguay.
Thank you. Kyle, welcome.
Thanks.
Try to feel relaxed here.
Yeah,
Okay.
I feel like I'm in high school again at the principal's office or something.
Well, you have 11 principals right here, okay? Kyle, you referenced, Mr. Chamberlain, you referenced in your remarks, you recently purchased your property at 54 Braidwood.
I did, yeah.
When was that purchased?
A year ago this month. actually.
So if I can ask, during that process, were you made aware? So, okay. If I might supplementary, Mr. Appleby.
No, I wouldn't have bought the house if I knew this
Yeah,
department.
but Mr. Appleby, this application has been in process for how long, sir?
Through the chair, this process started on what we call like the pre-consultation phase in April 2021. And then it would have been deemed complete in May of 2022 is when the formal application came in and was deemed complete. And so at that time, I guess I'm just trying to think back to notices going out. We would have issued a notice of complete application, and it would have gone up on our website back in July of 2022. Neighborhood meeting would have been held February of this year, which would have included a notice around to the immediate neighbors.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Appleby, so Mr. Chamberlain, it appears at the time that you were contemplating or purchased the property, this application would have been, was live. And it's unfortunate, sir, during that purchase and sale that you may not have been aware of this application.
Yeah, no, nothing was disclosed to me. I actually got possession of the house, I believe, the 1st of June, so up to 2022. So, and then I did receive the other notices, like he said, but yeah, nothing was. The homeowner previous didn't say anything. Real estate agents didn't say anything. Nobody said anything. If they did, I wouldn't have bought the house.
I appreciate your comments. I
Yep.
just wanted to try to
No,
clarify
thank you for
timing.
that. Yeah, I
Okay, you're
appreciate
welcome.
it. Okay.
Mr. Chamberlain. Is there a Miss Jackson? Hi, Nancy. How are you?
Hey, hi, Kendra. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Nancy. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. We need your name, your full name and address for the clerk.
Yes. My name is Nancy Jackson. I live at 527 Rose Avenue, so just one street over, and I've lived there for 37 years. Yeah. So thank you very much for having me here, for giving me the opportunity to speak, and to you and all of the council members. I really appreciate it. I'll be brief. I'm really kind of just speaking from the heart. So I'm gonna be very brief. I want to address the well-being of the children and youth who may reside in this building. Multiple units have 2 or 3 bedrooms. And the more I looked at the plan, the more I questioned, is this, have we allowed for enough room to grow for children, to really grow over 5 or 6 or 10 years? And so I want to acknowledge that what children need most is housing. So great, congratulations. I mean, this is an awesome opportunity. It's in the right place. I've lived there so long. It's a wonderful community. It has trails and schools and shopping and a new community center. It has everything. It's great, and I really support the building and the so badly needed housing units. However, having said that, I just want to comment on what I see again as a lack of family-friendly, specifically child and youth-friendly places, space to grow, and space to be a community, space to have some outdoor activity and amenities that allow people to say, this is our home, and we can have a meeting outside, or we can sit with our grandchildren, or even if we're ill, we can wheel our wheelchair out and watch our kids play a little bit. And I know that there's not enough space for a full playground, but I don't see any courtyards in the planning. I don't see any green space that's removed from traffic. I'm almost done. I just want to say that in the South End, we have a porch community. I'm so privileged and so fortunate to have a backyard for my kids to play in, and front porches where neighbors watch the kids ride their bikes up and down the sidewalks, and we talk to each other. Will the people who live in this community have that? Will they have that chance to meet outside and to talk about their kids growing and to talk about the snow and to whatever, to make snowman and to, like, will they be able to live? We have this opportunity to get this right. This is our very first building in the South End, and it's exciting. We're going to have a lot of families. We're going to have kids. We're going to keep our schools because schools need to be filled with kids. We have all of that, but let's really get it right. Let's add whatever we can, whatever. I realize it's a money issue too, and it's a business. It's a building that needs to be profitable. I mean, I get it, but I want kids to be able to grow in it. I really am almost done. Jane Jacobs said that a successful neighborhood has 3 qualities: clear separation of public and private spaces. So where kids can go in and say, this is my home, this is my space, come over and play in my baseball court, you know? to eyes on the street to ensure safety, a village to raise a child where people can see other people's children playing.
Yeah, 1 minute left.
Okay. And a friendly, pedestrian-friendly design, including the ability of children and youth to play and interact and grow together, right? So I just want to acknowledge that I'm not a planner. I'm only speaking from my heart and my lived experience of what it's like to grow up in that South End. And other people, new people need that same feeling, that same opportunity to say, wow, this is where I live, this is where I play, and this is where I'm going to meet my friends and learn to ride my bike and all those things. It can't be just an apartment complex. I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Burke, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks through the chair. To Ms. Jackson, thank you. That was very moving for me to hear. And I echo your sentiment of feeling like, how do we get it right? It seems like as a new counselor who's also not a planner, but is very moved emotionally and by my heart and by my own experiences. I feel like a lot of these projects that we're seeing are capitalizing on our need for housing. And I question the sustainability of all of them. And what you just said reminded me of that. So my question is to staff, to Mr. Appleby, based on Ms. Jackson's really passionate response to your report. I'm going to ask you the question that she raised is like, how do we get it right? Because we are a city that has a really rich history of putting a lot of forethought.
Councillor Burke, the question is to go to the presenter.
Oh, okay. I thought we asked staff. Okay, there we go. Yeah. But I guess I'll ask you the question then, and you spoke to a little bit, but through the chair to you, what could we do to get it right?
Well, I just hope that there will be some designated community space where parents can meet outside and talk a little bit or share concerns about their children or concerns about the neighborhood, a place where people can be a community and not live isolated in their own units with no outdoor gathering place.
Thanks. And then through the chair, last question, just for clarity, are you concerned by the loss of that big open field that exists right now? Is that part of it?
No, I mean, we always want to keep green space, and a lot of the council here will know that I'm really big on green space. And so that's important, but we need housing, and that space is underutilized by far. You know, I see kids play soccer, etc. But we have this great space for housing in an absolutely wonderful neighborhood.
Okay, thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Mrs. Jackson? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here, Nancy.
Thank
Appreciate
you. Thanks very much for your time.
For next is Kent Randall from EcoView Consulting. I tried to get the wrinkle out of your pants the first time, Kent, so. Need your name and address, Kent.
Kent Randall, Principal Planner, EcoView Consulting, 311 George Street North. So thank you for the time. We are the agents for the applicant, Global Point Logistics. With me tonight is Neil Campbell from Aside Architects as well, in case anybody has questions about the design, and I'll get to the design just in a second. I guess just to start it off, the Brad gave a great summary in terms of what this achieves from a policy perspective and what it achieves from a housing perspective. You'd mentioned the missing middle. This is a type of housing that certainly in my lifetime in the city, we didn't see much of, and we're starting to see a lot more. It's a very good thing. Sustainability was mentioned. This is the road to sustainability, housing project like this. It's in proximity to shopping. It's in proximity to biking lanes, transit, everything that you need that this city can provide. It's in close proximity to, right? So It's an ideal site. It's an underutilized site. It's on a property that's designated for employment, but really is not suited for it. As Brad said, it's a relic. It's a relic of the past. It was the former Nashua Paper and Peterborough Paper converters. It's no longer that. It's now dry industrial and light industrial and commercial. So it fits in well in terms of the operation that's occurring there east of where it's going to go. So it's an ideal site. It's the site that as planners we look at and we say this is where something like this should go. It's not high density. It's considered medium density, so it fits in well with an already low density area. So we're not really interrupting that too much. So from our perspective, it's a great site. Just to speak to amenity space, and I do appreciate the deputant's deputation. It's understood. Apartments are not always going to be the best places to provide amenity space, but in this case, Neil's wonderful design includes some really good amenity spaces within the building. There are front yards, and I'm not sure if I can go back to that. I don't think that presentation there. If I can just show you here. So if you see here, these units along the, these units along Monaghan Road here actually walk out to the road. So they have a door out onto the street so people can have that front yard patio and actually look out onto the street. And Jane Jacobs, of course, who's considered near a god to planners. I'd heard the eyes on the street, and that's very much something that the effect that's provided there. Rooftop amenity areas for the top floors, balconies, a room, a general purpose room for indoor amenity space. And as Brad noted, it's in close proximity to quite a few parks. So it's something that you have to balance, of course, with an apartment building. You're not going to get the same thing that you would get from a single detached dwelling, where you get a nice little yard that the kids can play in. But it's something that folks and families in a lot of cities get by with. And it's perfectly, in our opinion, appropriate in a lot of situations. And then there was also the comment about the privacy and the lots to the north, and we did have that conversation during the open house with some neighbors to the north. It's at the top of our mind. We understand. As Brad had pointed out, we will be going through site plan approval, so that's going to provide the opportunity to sort of hash out those details, which would include presumably, or which it will likely include a fence and some landscaping in the form of trees or shrubs and that sort of thing. Councillor Duguay had mentioned the access from Braidwood. So the access to the industrial area at that corner down here will actually be, I think the plan is to take that away. There's 2 points of access, 2 points of entry to this portion of the building. So one of those points of entry will be taken away at this point down here. Of course, if there is a plan to split it, we would go through that process in terms of consent. And as Mr. Appleby had noted, the intention is to sever this property. So it's set up to be severed from the balance of the land, so the industrial lands. That's what the zoning is for, those 2 modified districts. So that's essentially it from my perspective, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Randall? Don't see you. Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any questions from councillor on this zoning? Don't see any, so I guess we'll go for a vote. Kevin?
Mr. Chairman, I'd be prepared to move the recommendation.
Need a move and a seconder. And His Worship? Go to vote. Pass the gavel over to my chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rial. We'll move on to our second planning matter for this evening, which is a zoning bylaw amendment for 53 and 59 Leahy's Lane, report IP SPL 23-018. And we have from One Community Planning, Mr. Jamie Hofling. Oh, but we don't. I got jumped ahead as well. I am so sorry. I went to the wrong notes. Christy Gilbertson is going to present on behalf of staff first, the whole plan, and then we will go to the consultant. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. This evening before you is a zoning bylaw amendment for 53 and 59 Leahy's Lane. This property is located just east of Armour Road, just north of the new Habitat for Humanity condominium on Leahy's Lane. It's actually two properties, 53 and 59, and they are essentially mirror images of one another. These properties are currently developed with two 5-unit dwellings. So 2 buildings, each having 5 dwelling units within, and you can see those on the screen there now. The owner, there's 2 separate owners, one for each property. We have the applicant is Jamie Hofling of One Community Planning. Each lot is approximately just over 1,000 square meters. Each lot is approximately 20 meters wide. As previously indicated, they are currently supporting a 5-unit residential dwelling on each lot, and this proposal is to add 1 dwelling unit to each building. The applicant is proposing to amend section 3.9.311. So exception 311 currently is a site-specific exception that speaks to 5 units in particular. So the amendment would facilitate the 6th unit in each of the existing buildings, and the modifications that are proposed will address the addition of the 6th unit. So just before you and in the staff report, each regulation has a proposed new metric, and it is to reflect the change from 5 units to 6. This is a concept plan, site plan, that depicts how the site will be developed. In terms of policy review, this application was supported by our provincial policy statement, as well as the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, as well as the official plan. This application was circulated in accordance with the Planning Act, and there were no public comments or concerns that were received as of the time of preparing this presentation. To summarize, the recommendation before you is to amend the exception 311 to reflect the 6 dwelling units instead of 5. Those items are summarized there. Oh, and I guess that's it. I thought I had inputted just the map, but there's no map because we're just changing the text in this instance. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that committee may have.
Thank you, Mrs. Gilbertson. Any questions? Councillor Baldwin, please.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And Ms. Gilbertson, thanks for the presentation. Is the 6th unit going to be in the basement?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's my understanding that the 6th unit will be in the lower level of the buildings.
Okay. And Madam Chair, I guess the other question is I'm just wondering why we didn't build 6 units to start with. But could you explain why they didn't do that? Could the applicant when they get here?
Possibly the applicant could provide a bit more context, but it's my understanding this was rezoned in 2017 to facilitate the 5 units. So it may have been a function of the time as well.
Got it. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for Mrs. Gilbertson? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Christy. And we don't have any public registered to speak as a delegation, so I will go to Mr. Jamie Hofling if he would like to come forward, please, from One Community Planning. Hey, Jamie, welcome. Mrs.
Thank you. Mrs. Jamie Hofling.
Nice to meet you.
Yes. Hi, Madam Chair and members of council. My name's Jamie Hofling from One Community Planning. I'm the planner and the director, and I am the agent on the application on behalf of the property owner. I just want to thank staff for doing a great job working with us. It took a long time to get here, so we're happy to put this forward to ask for the additional units. Christy did a great overview, but if there's any additional questions from council, I'd be happy to answer them. I did inherit this file, so through you, Chair, to Mr. Baldwin, I'm not sure why the sixth unit was not incorporated at that time. Maybe it was an afterthought.
Thank you. Any questions for Mrs. Hofling? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. I'll see you shortly. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Do we have a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Crawley. Is there anybody? Go ahead, Councillor Baldwin. Comment?
Sure.
Okay. No further comments or questions. Seeing none, we'll go to a vote, Mr. Clerk. And that is carried unanimous with Councillor Duguay not participating due to his declared pecuniary. So now we will move on to the next planning item on the agenda, which is a zoning bylaw amendment for 376 Rubridge Street, report IPSPL 23-019. And again, we will have Mrs. Christy Gilbertson present the step presentation. Welcome back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have to move the desk, which is very nice. So the subject property for this zoning amendment is located on the east side of Rubridge Street, just west of downtown. It's located in what we call the Church Row kind of corridor of Reed and Rubridge. The property currently supports a 2.5-story classic Peterborough dwelling or building, and this is an overhead view looking east. The owner of this property is the Roman Catholic Diocese for Peterborough. The applicant is Jamie Hofling of One Community Planning. The lot area is about 230 square meters, and it's a fairly narrow lot frontage of 7.2 meters. Currently, it is used as a single detached dwelling, and the owner and applicant are proposing an amendment to facilitate an office use of the property. They are proposing to rezone the property from the R123 zoning district to SP 241, which is a commercial district, which will permit a small scale office. As a result of the change in use, there would be 2 additional parking spaces that would be required. And then it is proposed that these be accommodated off-site on other properties that are also owned by the diocese. Just this map again highlights some of the adjacent properties that the diocese own within the vicinity of this property. One of the reasons why that arrangement kind of has come to be is there isn't enough room to establish parking in the front yard of this property. The option is available for cash in lieu in this area, and there is a reasonable location where parking needs can be met. As you can see here, this is the site concept plan depicting the footprint of the existing building. And I believe the intention is to put a rear deck off the back of it to serve as some amenity space for the people using the office, which could have been a spot where parking could have been occupied. However, this was a better arrangement for the property as a whole. This application was reviewed under the PPS as well as the growth plan and the official plan, and it was supported fully in all of those documents. Notice was circulated as per the Planning Act, and this one also did not receive any comments as of the time of preparing for this presentation. Before you, the recommendation is to rezone the lands to introduce the SP 241 zone on site with a holding provision. So the SP 241 zone, it permits office uses, clinic uses, as well as dwelling units, but within the existing structure. So currently it's only residential that's permitted, but the SP 241 provides a bit of flexibility. And the holding symbol is recommended to ensure that the required agreement that would be needed along with the payment of cash in lieu of parking are fulfilled by the applicant and owner by way of a formal arrangement. And this is the map that depicts what the zone would be going to from its current zone. With that, I would welcome any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor Baldwin, please.
So thanks, Madam Chair. Ms. Gilbertson, does the addition of the office space in the dwelling, does that negate people residing in there as well? Will it become exclusively an office then, or a clinic as described?
Through the chair, it's my understanding that SP 241 has the flexibility where perhaps the main floor could have one office use and the upper could be a residential unit. The applicant is here this evening, so I am unsure whether it is proposed that that split occur, but there is flexibility granted with SP 241 that allows it to kind of go back and forth depending on the market demand for one or the other.
Okay, I'd heard us reference the housing crisis earlier, and if we have a number of people who are converting single family houses or duplexes into office space, I was just a little bit concerned about perhaps that being a trend, but I'll ask the applicant when they get here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Any further questions for Ms. Gilbertson? None. Christy, I do have one, if I may, please. Would you know where the parking spaces are going to be located? Do we see that on the map there? Is it in close proximity?
Madam Chair, it's my understanding that when an applicant or an owner enters into an agreement for payment of cash in lieu of parking, there isn't necessarily the requirement that it be provided off-site. However, in this instance, since the diocese is a property owner throughout the area, they've indicated that they'll pay the cash in lieu of parking, which would go into a reserve to fund future parking needs in this area. However, if there is an actual need for someone to put their car, one of the workers at the office, they can choose the Knights of Columbus lot, which is virtually empty during the day. That would be the most reasonable arrangement in my mind.
Okay, thank you. And you did mention there'd be a formal agreement on that. So will that be on title?
Yes, Madam Chair. So the holding provision is in place, being recommended to be put in place so that agreement can be finalized with between the owner and legal services, and it would be registered on title. And we keep track of all of the cash in lieu of parking payments that occur.
Great, thank you very much. So last call for questions. Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and we do not have any other delegates for or against this proposal, but we do have the planner here. Would Mrs. Jamie Hofling be in the room? Welcome back.
Yes, thank you again, Madam Chair. So again, I am the agent on the application. I do have the property owner here, Mr. LeBlanc from the Roman Catholic Diocese of Peterborough. Again, thanks to Christy for doing a great job presenting the application. It's also one that has been in the works for a while. This was my first time doing a parking cash in lieu arrangement. So it's been a learning experience and staff have been very knowledgeable. It's also my understanding that you don't need to show exactly where the parking will be, just that you can make the argument, a strong argument for why cash in lieu is appropriate. And in this instance, staff felt having the neighboring properties was sufficient enough. So we appreciate staff's recommendation and we support that. And through the chair to you again, Mr. Baldwin, it's my understanding that when this property was on the market, it sat for quite some time due to the fact that it has a shared laneway. It doesn't have its own laneway. So there is an easement there, and the new owner of the property submitted a much lower value and was able to get the property. So there wasn't a strong desire to purchase it for residential at the time. But as Christy alluded to, we're not removing that residential. So in the future, there's always that opportunity, which I think is a really great attribute of that zoning. If there's any more questions from council, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Okay, do I have a mover of the recommendations?
Move the recommendation.
Moved by Mayor Leal. Any, you have a comment, Councillor Brooke? No, not at committee level, sir. Okay, so no comments or questions, debate. Okay, Mr. Clerk, we will go to a vote, please. And that is carried unanimously, minus Councillor Duguay, who declared a conflict.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate that. Thank you, Councillor Riel. So we'll go to our committee reports, 12A1, new official plan amendment analysis. Councillor Duguay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With respect to, I want to first just thank Commissioner Reyna at the time of authoring the report, and I believe Mr. Appleby and others for the production of this report. I have really one comment or two. Mr. Appleby, I understand that arising from the ministerial approval of the official plan amendment, the clock has started to tick insofar as our obligation to update our zoning bylaw, correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. We have 3 years to update our zoning.
Okay, thank you. Secondly, on page 4 of the report, I think all of council are aware of this, yet another round of changes that are going to happen with the Planning Act, even though our document seems to align generally with some of the, quite smartly with most of the changes. It states here that the new provincial planning statement, if approved, would come into effect in the fall of 2023. Mr. Appleby, do we anticipate from that there might be further changes required of our official plan amendment? That's the first part of my question. I have a second part.
Through the chair, I think it's certainly possible. We'll have to wait and see what the final product comes out of that provincial planning statement. The one kind of big piece that's missing right now is around the natural heritage that hasn't been released yet, and so we're waiting for that. But there's certainly a possibility that other amendments might come. But I will say that the province, I think they were, they kind of knew what was coming down the pipe, and so when they approved our official plan, I think some of the amendments they made to our official plan kind of had this forthcoming provincial document in mind.
That was my read of both documents. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Appleby, during the preparation of our city's official plan, it encompassed a robust community consultation process. Do you envisage then between now and perhaps the fall or sometime thereafter, some forum or some way to, in the event our plan needs to be changed, to introduce the public in some consultation forum other than a statutory meeting?
Through the chair, I think that's certainly possible. I think it depends on the nature of the changes. If they're literally sort of very minor adjustments, then the need may not be as compelling. But if there's certainly significant changes that come along, then sure, there's certainly opportunity there.
Thank you, Mr. Appleby. Those are my questions, Chairman Beamer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Are you comfortable moving it?
I am now.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you. Mayor Leal and Councillor LaChica. Mayor Leal.
Well, thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate Councillor Duguay moving this recommendation. I think by and large, when you review 61 recommendations, the suggested changes, I think by and large, I would categorize that of being quite helpful. We do know the government of Ontario has an overreaching a policy objective of building 1,500,000 new homes over the next 10 years to meet the growth in the province of Ontario, and of course to accommodate many new Canadians that we're going to welcome in every corner of this province. I'm also delighted to correct a situation with the Cold Springs area. I remember in 1997, I was part of the Boundary Adjustment Committee back then. And one of the recommendations of that adjustment committee, of course, was for the city of Peterborough to acquire those Cold Springs lands for residential development, and the trade-off, as we negotiated in good faith with our friends and neighbors of Autonomy South Monaghan, we would provide a servicing for those lands on the east side of Television Road. And we've all seen that wonderful subdivision that has taken place there. That was an agreement that benefit both parties. And I'm happy to say for Aon, this has been corrected. I think that's very important. And, Aon have been a great contributor to this community in many ways. Many of us had the opportunity to work with the late Ross Smith, and we know his commitment and his family's commitment to Peterborough, and I'm glad this has been resolved. But I really note there's if you take the opportunity, and I think this says it all of what the future may look like for us. If you look at Appendix B, page 104, it talks about the modifications make reference to accommodating employment land in the Cold Spring area has provided the opportunity to develop her to exclusively go back to residential development. As a consequence, the city will need to explore options of meeting employment land needs as identified in the lands need assessment. That is a very important statement. As through the 61 revisions, the changes that were suggested by the previous council on that official plan, that was submitted forward. Some of these residential lands were deemed changed to employment lands. These revisions take them back into residential development lands. And I think as we move forward, this sends a pretty powerful message of what we may be looking at in the not too distant future in terms of employment lands, that we can make sure that those people that are going to be living in all those homes have the opportunity to be employed right here in this region instead of being commuters going down the 407 or the 115/35.
Thank you very much, Mayor Leal. Councillor LaChica.
Excuse me. Thank you. Through you, Chair. I just wanted to express my appreciation for such a thorough and detailed report and how helpful it is to councillors, particularly just around language and how we interpret many of the changes that have come to us through legislation, pieces that are new and some that may be challenging. But at least there is now clarity for us and for the public as well. The Appendix B is just a phenomenal summary of the modifications, and that the city planning staff comments are greatly appreciated. So I'd like to thank Commissioner Reyna and the team for putting together such a thorough report. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor LaChica. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Hickey?
Thank you very much, Chair. I want to expand on what His Worship was saying, because if you really look at Table 167 with the modification for the employment lands, the city has given us an opportunity here to get lands, because by removing the ability to enable those as employment lands, they've basically said, and we know we have to have it. They've given us a tool that we can use. And I hope that the county is listening tonight, because we are going to have to get lands, whether it's, well, hopefully it's a amenable agreement, but with that, it gives us a new tool that we didn't have before. So.
Thank you, Councillor Hickey. Any further comments or questions? Moved by Councillor Duguay. We'll take a vote. And that is carried. 12A2, pre-commitment, Armour Road reconstruction. Councillor Ailes?
Through the chair, I will move the report. I just have a question, I guess, for Mr. Nelson or maybe Mr. Papadopoulos. I'm going to get these questions. I've already started today getting questions about the road being tore up, and why isn't it going all the way up the hill to Park Hill Road?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The portion from Park Hill Road to Clifton has been previously reconstructed and resurfaced. So this is the remaining portion from Clifton to Hunter Street.
Through the chair to Mr. Nelson, but Councillor Baldwin and I sent a request in for some traffic calming. Is that going to be taken care of at Dufferin? There was a couple of serious accidents in that area. Is that going to be addressed? But also the gridlock that's happening at the corner of Park Hill and Armour continues. And certainly that's the questions that Councillor Baldwin and I are going to get from the residents as the construction continues all through the summer. Why aren't you doing all of these improvements at once?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the portion of let's deal with the Park Hill and Armour intersection. That has been a recommendation under the Transportation Master Plan for future improvements and upgrades. I agree, it would be nice to do all of the construction at once and get it done, but unfortunately, financially and logistically, that is very difficult to do. This is a phase of projects that will look at this portion of the works. As you know, we have upgrades to the sanitary sewer, the storm sewer in this area to make improvements in aiding in flood reduction and greater capacity for sanitary sewer flows, as well as the final improving the road conditions when we're done. So again, as far as the other area in terms of traffic safety improvements, that's a continuous item that we continue as city. Again, there was recommendations made under the transportation master plan that traffic safety initiatives. You see another report in front of you tonight that speaks to one of those initiatives, and there will continue to be additional initiatives as we move forward, pending money and resources to be able to move those initiatives forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ailes. I have Councillor Duguay and Burke. Councillor Duguay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Mr. Nelson, if I might. Mr. Nelson? Your page number 2, item 5, speaks to Curtis Creek watershed. So my understanding then that some of this work will contribute to the Curtis Creek watershed and associated flood land reduction. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. There are increases to capacity and size of the storm sewer systems, as well as a fairly sizable low impact development addition as part of these construction works.
And then supplementary, Mr. Chairman, this improvements, will this help lands downstream along Hunter Street, Mark Street area, for example?
Through you, Mr. Chair, through the floodplain mapping, again, this is going to be a man-made, but as we do further improvements with Curtis Creek, those may very well have those improvements that you speak of. But again, the man-made improvements are seen as an alteration or a different measure in terms of reducing the overall flood reduction impact, but it will be realized in the less intense storms to definitely help with flood reduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is important because there have been some properties in the east part of our city that have been, their development and redevelopment has been encumbered by the floodplain associated with Curtis Creek. So if it's being more effectively managed, this is a good thing.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Duguay. I have Councillor Burke and Baldwin. Councillor Burke.
Thanks a lot, Chair Beamer, and through you to Mr. Nelson, who's behind the laptop. I have a sort of question that could be a naive question, but the thing that I had circled here was from the tender summary. And what I noticed was that the people that we're going with were like $2 million less than the next highest bid. And that stuck out to me as being a huge difference, right, for the same service. And that comes from someone who like for my own household and businesses, when I get something that's so drastically low compared to the norm, it kind of stuck out to me. So I'm just asking you that question. How is this company able to save $2 million? And what are we going to lose or potentially, like how are those savings going to happen? That's my question.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is a concern for staff. However, it's part of the process. They did close their tender with that dollar value. We are confident the contractor that is recommended to be awarded the work has previously worked and did the work upstream. So they did the Curtis Creek improvements. They are operating under a different name, but it's essentially the same company. They're still carrying basically the same staff. We are confident in their abilities. And again, unfortunately, we are seeing some volatile pricing right now with the number of financial and economic impacts. So in that circumstance, we're confident that the work will get performed, and it's staff's duty to ensure that we do what we can do within our powers to ensure that price is maintained and met.
So thank you for that answer. And through the chair, did if it was a concern to staff and when you pressed them, did they sort of just in layman's terms for the council here, did they give any specific reasons? Like I can see hundreds of thousands, but it was like $2 million less than not the high bid, but the mid bid. And did they now? And you mentioned that was a concern for you. Did you question them on that? And did they give a specific answer?
So through you, Mr. Chair, going back, we were challenged with trying to get the contractors to present where they're finding their cost savings and benefits, because sometimes that's proprietary and that's work that they have taken advantage of. And again, in some circumstances, we don't know the conditions under which they have bid the work in order to try and continue to employ local forces, local staff. There might be a myriad of reasons as to why they wanted to actively or progressively chase a certain project in order to remain attractive and or secure the works. They might very well had additional staff that they want to maintain and continue to keep working. So therefore, it is a challenge at times to fully get what the true answer is and the difference in the variance of the pricing. And as I say, unfortunately, we're seeing right now some very volatile and increased pricing due to, again, economic times as well as fuel prices and various things that have large impacts on construction pricing.
Commissioner Reyna?
Thanks for answering that on the fly. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, I just want to tell you that we have a very stringent procurement process, and whenever they do, they are very in-depth reference checks on the company. And the way you are saying that they are bidding low, so it might be that the other companies are overbidding. So it's a very the whole process. There is a team of the panel, and they have to submit the reference checks. And what Mr. Nelson is telling, the price escalation, that's global. If something changes, varies, it's not that they are doing them themselves. It's a supply chain issues and all this. But as per selection process is concerned, we follow a very strict due diligence. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Baldwin?
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I'll go quickly to Blair back there. Mr. Nelson, the Durrell Street location there has been a problem and a concern for a while there. They've got the single stop at Durrell, and then they've got the flashing crosswalk there. Councillor Riel and I heard this during the election time. And in the description of work there, there's reference to pedestrian signals at Durrell Street. That doesn't include a stoplight there. Am I reading that correctly? Because there is a concern about kids crossing Armour Road at Durrell. There's also the concern about people cutting through Durrell Street to get to Tim Hortons rather than going up Hunter Street to the King George Store or Kawada East City. So is it going to remain, you're going to improve it, but it's not going to be a red, green, amber stoplight. Have I read that correctly?
Through you, Mr. Chair, you're correct. The anticipation is to put in a pedestrian crossing in order to add safety measures for vulnerable users or pedestrians that are trying to cross at that location to the park. Again, there is some request to look at traffic calming measures in that area also. Again, the intent here is to improve the more major road, which is Armour Road, and keep vehicles on that road in order to basically, again, avoid that cut through traffic. Because if we maintain our more significant roads in a better condition, typically traffic will prefer to remain on those more significant roads.
Thanks for that answer, and I'm interested in the next report, which talks about the traffic calming in each of the wards. And certainly the location that references this report is one of those locations where traffic calming is certainly recommended by the residents there, as is Autonomy Valley School and St. Patrick's, which is sort of referenced in the next report. So thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Any further comments or questions? Moved by Councillor Riel. We'll take a vote. And that is carried. All right, moving right along, 12A3, feasibility of new or temporary traffic signals, Brea Lane, Cherry Hill. Councillor Vasiliadis and Crowley. Councillor Vasiliadis.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a few questions. This one, I believe, is from Mr. Nelson. Can you confirm that the cost to implement the temporary traffic lights is approximately $160,000?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Okay. And this might be to Mr. Malin or Mr. Nelson. What is an example of an intersection that has a high rate of collision? Because this was considered a lower rate, but can you give me an example of what that means? How many collisions is considered a high rate?
Through you, Mr. Chair, my preference is not to give a specific location because then it will be considered to be a problem intersection. The high rate is a location that right now, obviously the rate that we're seeing is less than some of the other intersections, which exemplify the similar characteristics, arterial to collector road or arterial road. So again, I'm standoffish of giving a specific location for that consideration that it then would be made public and considered to be a problematic intersection.
Thank you. In the report, it says Brayley Drive has 9,800 vehicles per day on the roadway. So is that considered high volume?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would be that's a fair volume of traffic. Yes, it's again, it's a volume of traffic that would be expected for an arterial street. It's within the range of an arterial street, and again, as the report indicates, it's as we move towards the possible future reconstruction, it does indicate that signals are warranted, but not definitively required at this time.
So in the report, it talks about the reconstruction of Brayley potentially happening in 2025. Can you tell me how much is pre-approved for that reconstruction?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have that number specifically at this time. I believe it's not a significant amount of money that we have been utilizing some of those pre-approved funds to move forward with the detailed design. The detailed design is considerably along the way at this time, and there was some utility relocations that have been performed, but the detailed design would be required to be completed, and then the remaining utility relocations completed prior to reconstruction.
So you would know what the complete cost to reconstruct Brayley would be then?
At this time, I don't have a full number. We haven't done a final estimate based on the current design. But again, that will be something that will be in future years' budgets coming forward. Correct.
So the original design was in 2015. And so because you're talking about the redesign, so has it been looked at, or will any changes be made from the original design then?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the intent is to remain with the current concept design. There will be some investigations looked at because a couple of the items that have come into play is the low impact development requirements. There will be some additional review and look at some of that, as well as some of our adjustments to agency approvals, and those will have to be taken into account.
Okay, and the only reason why I mentioned that is that, Lily Lake subdivision was approved in 2017, so that design was a 2015 design, and even Batten White was eventually approved probably through the province way past that time. So that could potentially mean more traffic in that direction. And also too, so the transportation master plan, have we received that back from the province yet? Has it been approved?
The transportation master plan, my understanding, is a guiding document for municipal works that basically gets submitted to the province, but doesn't actually formally receive an approval. So from that, it's a guiding document for municipal works and moving our transportation system forward. And then if there's individual projects that require a high level of review or environmental assessment, then those are done, and those approvals are sought through the ministry.
Okay. No, I was just wondering too, because I know I was a part of the steering committee, and that and we didn't really look at all the alternatives really of what we could be using to move traffic. And so I was just concerning to me too, certain parts like the Southern Corridor, other areas that could help traffic flow and probably ease traffic flow on the on Brayley. So basically what I'm getting at here is that, in the actual report, it says, to date, the project is awaiting budget approval and currently proposed for 2025 capital budget request. However, the timing is contingent on sufficient funding being available to deliver capital improvement projects for the road service area. So in the report isn't really guaranteeing funding. We have to make sure that we do that. And over the years, I was actually able to go through our engineering, construction, public works capital budget for arterial roads. And, you know, it's interesting. Brayley was a front runner. And at one point, the Sherbrooke Street was a front runner, and it went back and forth. And again, this project was supposed to be started in 2018. And of course, here we are still talking about it. So, you know, the reason why I made the motion to look at the feasibility of this is that, you know, we have put in temporary traffic lights in other areas before for safety, for traffic flow. One thing, I mean, and I know the report can't mention is near misses, that you do get the emails and the phone calls from constituents that, hey, I almost was hit, or my child was almost hit in that particular area. And traffic flow in general too doesn't really talk much about that. But you know, we did put temporary traffic lights on Sherbrooke and Dunor. And at that time, I was told after Park Hill was completed, we're going to work on Sherbrooke Street. But interesting enough, when I look at it, that's around 2018, 2019. So it's kind of confusing on where the money's gone. You know, the commitment for that. But at that time, we actually did put temporary traffic lights there to make it safer and traffic flow. So that being said, I mean, I would like to make a motion or an amendment, and tell me if I'm in order or not, Chair, but I don't want to be contrary to what the actual motion is that $160,000 be pre-approved in the 2024 budget for temporary traffic signals at the intersection of Brayley and Cherry Hill Road. And again, I want to see this happen in 2025. I'm having a hard time believing that it's going to. And if it's delayed anymore, then that road gets more beat up. That intersection gets busier, and more problems can potentially happen. And basically, I'm bringing this forward because of the concerns of the constituents in the area. So does that fit? Is it contrary? Am I?
No, you're the main mover, Councillor Vassiliadis, so we can make that the main motion that $160,000 be pre-approved in the 2024 budget for temporary traffic signals at Brayley and Cherry Hill.
Yes, at the intersection, yeah.
Okay, so that's the main motion now, moved by Councillor Vassiliadis. So speaking to that, I have Councillor Crowley, Mayor Leal, and Councillor Degay. Councillor Crowley?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to echo Councillor Vassiliadis's comments. It's the one thing that we've heard the most is sort of the state of Brayley moving on to Kawartha Heights Boulevard and how it's absolutely needed. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Nelson, any sort of, assuming this goes through, any sort of temporary lighting that we have at Cherry Hill and Brayley, would it be specifically temporary? Would it need to be ripped out once the Brayley reconstruction happens? Or would there be a way of constructing it so potentially it wouldn't need to be destroyed when we do the Brayley reconstruction?
For the price that's given, it is totally temporary and those funds are throwaway.
Okay.
If there was a desire to put it in as a more permanent, the intersection would have to be reconstructed to add the turning lanes, and that's where you actually get the bigger benefit to the intersection. The hard part with that is, in order to do it and just look at the intersection, it's difficult because then you have to have the underground infrastructure to support it, and you need the tie-in points. So you're now partially towards doing the full reconstruction, and which comes at a much bigger dollar value.
Excellent. Well, I think that I'm going to go ahead and support the motion. It's, you know, sometimes you have to wear a representative hat. Sometimes you have to be a delegate for for your ward. And I think in this case, it's, I'm going to be a representative for my ward. It's something that everybody around that area has been asking for. It's something that, obviously the plan's been in place since 2015. It hasn't happened yet. Due to budgetary restraints, it's been bumped, understandable. But I think that it would be something that should it get bumped and bumped and bumped, at the very least, we would have something in place that would satisfy some of the residents in the area. So I'm going to go ahead and second it if you need one, but I support it. Thanks so
Okay.
much, sir.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crowley. Mayor Leal speaking to the motion.
Well, thanks very much. And I'm going to support this. And man, I wish Councillor Crowley Vasiliadis were around the 90s. When I put forward, we got 5 votes. We put forward a major capital program to 4-lane Brayley Drive, right from Fleming Parkway, right up to Atkinson Road. Because there was a number of us that time felt that should have been the Western Wing Road. I still feel that that way today. And it's most unfortunate that we didn't 4-lane the bottom end from Fleming Parkway up to Lansdowne Street, because in those days we'd actually had negotiated with Fleming College to take an extra 17 feet off their side, which would have provided a buffer for the residences on the east side. So that was all planned out. And beyond that, we wanted to work with Selwyn to 4-lane Atkinson Road and then build a connecting link through the hydro corridor over to the Lakefield Highway. So there you go. You have your Western Ring Road and moving all that high capacity traffic there. I must say that as we prepare the 2024 budget, this section of Brayley has to be put back on the front burner. It needs to be 4-lane because it's high capacity. And with those subdivisions that are being constructed in that generally western area, it's a priority to move those cars through that area. And if you look at potential lands that are out there, you look at Brookfield, you look at Peterborough Homes, where are the lands that they own? It's the old Stenson farm on the west side of Brayley Drive. So, folks, there's going to be a lot of development in that area. You need road capacity. Let's move up the Brayley Drive project, and we should get it done sooner rather than later.
All right. Thank you very much, Mayor Leal. Councillor Duguay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I found it interesting that earlier this evening we had a presentation from our planning staff with respect to the province's approval of our official plan document. So what I've, in light of what Mayor Leal has commented, our schedule of our new official plan schedules A, B indicate that the majority of the westerly boundary of our city is rural transitional. And if we read the ministerials, the province's direction, they've told us that's fair game. Those lands can now be developed for residential or employment purposes. So to Mayor Leal's point, along the west side of Brayley Drive, most of that, which is today largely undeveloped, is essentially positioned, in theory, to be growth and expansion of our community. Secondly, when I considered the official plan maps, Brayley Drive, starting from, I'll call it from Lily Lake Road, all the way to Airport Road, it intersects with, see if I get my math right here, 4 major arterial streets and 7 collector streets. And some of those are, they also continued westerly. Brayley Drive will become the major thoroughfare in our community. Absolutely will be, because the majority of lands that are appropriately positioned for development sit on our west boundary. More difficult to go to the south, more difficult to go to the north, and more difficult to go to the east. No offense to my colleagues on the east side of the city. So I think we need to be, I also wish to draw to council's attention that we have developments planned on Sherbrooke Street, residential intensification. Park Hill Road was developed. There's more development forthcoming. Lily Lake is certainly underway, as well as ongoing development on Lansdowne Street. And what they all have in common is Brayley Drive. I support my colleague's recommendation, and I think Brayley Drive will become a very, very important transportation and development corridor in our city's future growth. And I think we need to be fully aware of it, particularly in light of the staff report that outlines some of the ministerial directives that are imposed upon and our city faces. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Burke.
Yeah, thanks through the chair and to the West End councillors. I think that underneath anything I say is like the real understanding of why you guys are pushing for this, and I respect that. I'm as a counselor though, with my sort of like prudent hat on and you know, reading the report, I wonder like, could we set aside the idea of spending the $160,000 for the temporary lights and put more of a focus on the prioritization of the project as a whole? And would that be more prudent and the better route to take? Because my understanding from talking with staff and reading the report is that this is going to happen eventually and it's going to be done properly. And to put the 160,000 forward to do the temporary lights, we're just going to have to redo it at some point. Hope, and from the sounds of it, sooner rather than later. So that's my question.
So I think that would be budget. If you wanted to move a project up, that would be in November at budget time. Is that what you're asking to?
No, I'm just sort of asking the council, Don and Councillor Vasiliadis and Councillor Crowley, if they're at all concerned about the fact that this may hinder the prioritization of that project by temporarily putting in the lights. I'm asking them if they're at all concerned about the fact that this money is going to be spent temporarily, especially given the healthy conversation we've had about all of us sort of agreeing to prioritize that area. That's my question. Sorry if it's unclear.
Okay, councillors, if you want Councillor Vasiliadis, and then I have Councillor Purnell. Councillor Vasiliadis for a second time.
I think through my little journey there that I was trying to explain that it's been proposed before a time, and I think our concern is traffic flow right now. And if anything's delayed, and as we just all heard, that area is getting busier by the second. So we do need some kind of a traffic signal at that particular intersection, which has been asked for by all the constituents in the area. I do think that is a budget discussion as we bring it up. It's not necessarily today, but I understand what's in the report, but the report doesn't guarantee that it's going to start in 2025. It says pending. So when we talk in the budget, let's talk about it. That's great. Let's move it up. And then if we need to redesign, let's do that too. But I think that would be the time to do it. And I think right now I'm going to focus on what the report is actually about. And it's actually about, the temporary traffic signal at that intersection. But I appreciate what you're saying. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vasiliadis. Councillor Purnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to support the motion on the floor. Temporary quite often is not temporary. It becomes years and years and years. And I'll give you the example of the Lansdowne Street West project that's happening right now. But bear in mind, that was pre-approved in 2016, approved in the budget, and it was supposed to have been finished by 2020. Now we're looking at and it just didn't get done. And now we're in process, and we're still 1 or 2 years away from actually finishing that project. So 2024, 2025, when it was supposed to have been completed by 2020. So things do change, and our projects are so expensive now, and there's only so much capital money. So $160,000 is probably going to serve for many years, I would suggest. I'll support it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Purnell. Mayor Leal for a second time.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the other thing, and I've had a discussion with Mr. Rain about this, it may be an opportune time that we consider bringing back a traffic technical committee. I noticed since I've been back here, a number of reports, requests for traffic signals, stop signs, parking restrictions. At one time, the traffic technical committee did all the review of those requests. City staff determined warrants, if warrants were meant to bring in stop signs, traffic lights, etc. And it might be a better way, again, to streamline the process, bring them all back together in one report, and then we could deal with with an item at a time as they're put in a broader report. I think it might help our efficiency and the opportunity to review these quests on a more consistent basis as opposed to one-offs.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor Leal. Councillor Burke for a second time.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Beamer, and through you to staff. Just in terms of trying to understand this on the fly, the new motion that's attached to the report. Can staff speak to or compare for me the functional benefits of what's being proposed in the motion versus what the plan is that is in the near, maybe far off future?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to circle back to a comment that I made several times to members of the committee, and I'll keep referring back to it during budget discussions and deliberations last December, November, January, whenever it was we did it. Time's all blurring now. But there was a report before this council that explained the nature of the challenges with our capital budget and the amount of money that we have that we're willing to fund into our road network. We have a lot of people who are willing to voice the concerns about what needs to be done, but then the follow through on providing the funding to do those things is often lacking. I think that just, with all due respect. So, here we have another example of a project that staff have had sitting on the books, pretty much designed, ready to go. And every year we get a budget guideline that doesn't provide us with enough funding to implement the projects that have been requested by council. With specifics to this project, the benefits as outlined in the report don't materialize without the reconstruction of the intersection to provide the turning lanes that are going to provide the turning movements. So as was staff's recommendation, there isn't much benefit that the taxpayer and the residents are going to receive unless we make that additional level of investment to actually improve the intersection to its state that has been identified as what it needs to be to satisfy our needs through 2051 as identified in the Transportation Master Plan.
Thanks, and just through the chair, for my sake, do you have a number for that, the budgeted plan that keeps getting pushed off because we don't approve it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is a bit of a challenging number to circle around depending on and give us a pretty succinct answer. But as of the most recent asset management plan, I'll give you a number out of that document. It identifies that we're underinvesting in our infrastructure as a whole to the tune of around $70 million a year. So that is that big scary number. That's the consequence of the type of unsustainable development patterns that the city went through for like circa 1950 through to 2000. That resulted in us having a large burden of infrastructure that the tax base can't reasonably sustain in a long-term fashion. So that's that big number.
Thanks a lot. I have no further questions.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Duguay for a second time, Mayor Leal for a third and final, and Councillor Crowley for a second. Councillor Duguay for a second.
Thank you, Mr. Beamer. My understanding of Braley Drive and some of its earlier designs contemplated a 2015 development scenario. Staff has rightly identified that there were development patterns in the past that made it difficult to sustain the extension of infrastructure and, for example, provision of roads. But we now have very clear, again, I want the connection. There's a real connection between what the province of Ontario has told us we need to do on our major roads. Braley Drive, from my perspective, can become a major, not just a major transportation corridor, but a major development corridor, which can substantiate and justify the expense made to improve the road. I also believe that the 2015 design of Braley Drive will have to be vastly reconsidered because of the various developments and the introduction of the rural transitional opportunities arising along its west boundary. And I believe staff may correct me, but I can ask the question, have environmental assessments been carried out on Braley Drive at this point? insofar as widening scenarios based on the 2015 plan.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Previously, the current design and concept for Braley Drive through the previous Environmental Assessment Act indicated that it was a pre-approved project in the municipal class EA because there's no widening that's happening. So the environmental assessments, it would be a schedule. At that time, it was a Schedule A project, so therefore pre-approved. The only, I guess, improvements and additional was the turning movements at the intersections, and intersection improvement with turning lanes is considered a pre-approved project. If the city was looking at the possibility of moving it to a 4-lane configuration, it would have to be looked at. Now, there has been recent changes to the municipal class EA. However, that would have bigger impacts on property acquisitions. And as a result of those property acquisitions, a higher level of review would be needed.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think that answers my concern or question in part, that whilst we have an approved plan, and while it would impact Cherry Hill and Braley Drive, it's my professional experience that Braley Drive, the design will likely have to be tweaked, massaged to accommodate current legislative requirements and development realities. So this intersection, deference to my colleagues, could be awaiting permanent solution for some time. So their request seems reasonable. And again, I think Braley Drive is an under-realized resource that's staring all of us in the face, and we may have to reconsider its functionality and purpose in any event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duguay. Mayor Leal for a third and final.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. This is actually a question for Mr. Friedman. Mr. Friedman, there would be, as we start our deliberations for budget 2024, I know there was some comment a couple weeks ago about debt capacity and the ability to acquire debt. Would it be possible that we look at a debenture issue to look at paying for some of these very special projects that need to be done in terms of infrastructure? When we look at Braley or even Shamong Road, an investment in those two projects, from my way of thinking, would generate enough economic activity to really sustain that debt over a period of time, and for the city to reap the benefits of putting that kind of road capacity in place. Just to get your comment, Mr. Friedman.
Mr. Chairman, if I could recall back to about 2012, when staff brought forward a capital financing plan, and in those budget discussions at that time, it was very much the scenario that His Worship just outlined. It was very intentionally taking on additional debt and leveraging the cheap money that was out there. And we moved forward with a program whereby council approved intentionally increasing the tax rate with the sole purpose of taking on more debt. And we were able to bring forward and move forward a bunch of badly needed capital works. Of course, for those around the council table, they'll recall that after a number of successive years doing this, admittedly, council did get a little tired of that and opted instead to slow down approving those additional capital financing dollars. And it's partly, complements what Mr. Papadakis just so eloquently reminded us all of here a few moments ago, that we now have a fairly substantial infrastructure deficit that we all need to grapple with. So in answer to His Worship, absolutely, there's opportunity to take on additional debts. We have a detailed review done by Standards and Poor's every year in terms of our credit rating. They would suggest that the debt that the municipality actually holds is fairly low given the size of the municipality. There is opportunity to take on additional debt. As we bring forward the 2024 capital budget, we'll be looking at those numbers in detail, making an assessment as to whether or not we need to bring forward a report that would absolutely do, as His Worship said, look at that debt capacity with a view to, do we need to increase taking on additional debt and moving forward and getting at some of these projects to enable development to happen. So absolutely, we will be looking at that.
I asked the question in light that we've approved a strategic plan for the city. An incumbent in that strategic plan is having the infrastructure to support that strategic plan for future opportunities. So I just happen to think this is a discussion that probably needs to take place.
Thank you, Mayor Leal. Councillor Crowley for a second time.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Well, I guess I'm not asking anybody questions, just a comment, but I've spoken to Mr. Papadakos in the past and in the recent past, and absolutely, we need to fund infrastructure. One of the things that I think we all hear the most and read the most about online and in person with people is how terrible some of the roads are and the state of the roads and how bad they are. And I mean, we're coming up to the budget, and I absolutely think that infrastructure should be high on the list. I've spoken to, is he still Commissioner Reyna, or is it until tomorrow, Commissioner Reyna? Okay, fair enough. Okay, until midnight. And some of the ideas that he has suggested regarding budgets moving forward, I think that it would really be important for this council and all councils moving forward, all budgets moving forward, is that we start to prioritize infrastructure a little bit more. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. So thank you for Mr. Papadakos for enlightening us. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crowley. Councillor Baldwin.
Yeah, just a comment, Mr. Chair. I've been to Haley and Cherry Hill several times. I believe it's a four-way stop. And if you're in line there, whether you're in line with the four-way stop because there's no right-hand turn lane or no left-hand turn lane, my fear is by approving this as a temporary light, you're going to be just staying in line longer, going from Cherry Hill, Braley and Cherry Hill down to Lansdowne Street in a line with a light, as opposed to the way it works now is the person on the right goes first and then the next person, you have some courtesy there. And the other part about it is I really don't like throwing away $160,000. I'm not convinced, just with this discussion, that by putting in a light there, it's going to move traffic any more than a four-way stop is now. I suspect, and I don't know because I'm not there at peak times, but you would have some concerns with respect to moving traffic between 4 and 6 p.m. and probably between 7 and 9 in the morning. And after that, it probably functions relatively well. So unfortunately, I'm not going to support the recommendation based on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Councillor Vassiliadis for a third and final.
Thank you, Chair. And who would think a conversation about an intersection would go to this? And, this is why you do bring it up and you draw attention to concerns in your ward. And if I recall my colleagues in the east side of the city talking about Ashburnham Drive. I remember my first term. That's all you talked about. But at the end of the day, you did get it repaved, and it looks great. And so, I mean, that's a part of this too, is to draw attention to it. I'm glad that my colleagues around the table see the importance of Braley and why we need a reconstruction in that area. Now, I'm just going to address the left-hand turn a little bit too, but we put in, temporary lights on Nassau Mill Road and Armour Road, and Woodland and Water Street. And they seem to function fine. They don't have the left turns or whatever, but certainly we do put these in to create traffic flow. And again, it's about safety too in this area. A lot of near misses. So, but no, again, I have learned from my colleagues in the east end of town, but you have to draw attention to the area, but we do see how it's important. And in the budget time, let's talk. I think it'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vassiliadis. Councillor Burke for a third and final. You're good. Any further comments or questions? I'll just make a few quick comments. I think Councillor Vassiliadis and Crowley are doing a great job bringing attention, and that is key. So good job. I too, like Councillor Baldwin as Chair of Finance, have trouble throwing away 160,000 that could go to permanent traffic calming, a new road, permanent enhancement of of a traffic signal. So when capital's so tight, I do have trouble doing that, but I think the discussion was well warranted. And Brayley is a road that we need to invest in, as is Sherbrooke, as is Charlotte, as is Shamong Road, which was a top priority and has been pushed back due to financing. Just in terms of capital, just just a few reminders. One thing that will help our capital is new land and new development. You look at the casino, and Mr. Freeman can correct me, but I think the casino, that one business, is bringing in $850,000 a year in tax revenue. One business, $800,000 a year in tax revenue. One business, 0.5% that can go to capital. One business. So we need to focus on more land to get 5, 10, 15, 20 of those types of businesses, much more revenue for capital. Because as much as we all want new roads, we all know the reality of the situation of the taxpayer in the city of Peterborough. The other thing is, if capital is going to be a focus in November, one thing we're going to have to pull back on is operating. And operating has been a challenge for this council and previous councils. It's hard to say no. People show up and want more operating, whether it's full-time employees, whether it's Wolf Street, whether it's the arts. And we say yes because we can't say no. And that drives the budget. So if we're going to focus a little bit more on capital in the coming years, we need to start to say no to some of the operating requests. We can't be all things to all people. So just a few comments. Any further comments or questions? All right, moved by Councillor Vasiliadis. We'll take a vote. Councillor Purnell and Riel. Okay. Okay, system might be slow, but we'll get there. Okay. But you don't have to do that.
Councillor Purnell voted yes.
Councillor, are you comfortable giving us a yay or a nay verbally? Yay verbally? Yes. And that is carried. Thanks, everyone. And the final item this evening, approval citywide speed limit. Councillor Riel, Hakey, and Crowley. Councillor Riel?
Through the chair to Mr. Nelson, could you please tell me how were these schools picked and by who?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I may have to ask for more specifics on picking, because the speed reduction is citywide at all schools.
Yeah, but you've got a pilot project here for 5 schools, one in each ward. So you have 2 Catholic schools, you have 2 public schools, and you have 1 French immersion school. So if you were coming to me and asked me as a counselor what school I would pick in my ward, it would be Autonomy Valley. River Road South is a raceway. No aspersions on St. Patrick's. All schools should have the zoning, but it's a pilot project. So that's why the question, why were these schools picked and by who?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to refer to Mr. Peter Mallon, who's the traffic and parking manager, and he will have more information on that.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. To Councillor Riel, the staff picked one school for each ward to make 5, and as well We picked them based on a more higher capacity type of roadway. And as well, the pilot project is only on the additional road safety measures. That includes pavement markings, driver feedback signs, and those measures will be put at those 5 schools, evaluated over approximately 12 months. And we'll be back to council with a report stating successes of the different types of road safety measures, and before they get recommended or not get recommended to go at all school areas.
To the chair, my second question, why is the only one area in town that has the feature community safety zones when I asked the former the planning and infrastructure person at that time, he said that would never happen again, because I felt that the area of Weller Street that had these zoning things, I had all kinds of areas of my ward that needed the same feature. So are you telling me now that the feature now, the community zoning or safety zones, this is going to apply across the city? And who is going to make the determination of where these are going to go?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So there's a community safety zone that's being recommended and to be implemented at each of the school areas throughout the city. So again, that was the premise behind trying to recommend and implement community safety zones in those areas where the vulnerable users were, school children, parents getting their children to school, and being in a circumstance so that we can have that and then provide the city with some options as we move forward to help enforce those zones, because the community safety zones need to be there prior to us having the ability to move to other options likes of automated speed enforcement.
The chair to Mr. Nelson, I mean, the one area in town that has it, which is a Weller Street, which is almost in the avenues or a little old West End. The only school is St. Mary's, and that's farther up Weller Street than where the signage now is. And that's when I approached the former commissioner of infrastructure and planning of why couldn't I use that feature in my area of town. He says, well, it was a one-off and it will never be done again. So I'm saying, why wouldn't there be these features used in areas, not just because they're school zones, but that have the problem of speeding and other areas in my ward and across the city that would need these features on their streets?
Through the chair, community safety zones may be designated by council where public safety is a concern. What it does is it brings drivers aware of the zone that they're in, and as well, fines may be doubled for HTA violations. The Wellis Street community safety zone was put in probably 20 years ago, and it was put in there probably not so much of a safety concern such as schools or parks. And I know the police had a lot of problems enforcing that area. And for that reason, I believe council made a motion not to install community safety zones moving forward up until this point.
To the chair again, to Mr. Nelson, I think the only way that this is, it's great to have signage and all the rest of stuff. The only way, and you said, until you have this feature of community safety zone, you can't get photo radar in. That's the only way we're going to stop people from speeding in the city of Peterborough. The sooner it comes here, the sooner we're going to grapple with the problem of people speeding in the city. Not putting a sign up. I've got one right at almost my doorstep, the electronic solar one, and people are still flying down the street. So until we get photo radar and you hit them in their pocketbook, you can put all the signs till the cows come home.
Thank you, Councillor. Are you comfortable moving it? Oh, did you? Apologies. Thank you, Councillor. You're a visionary. Thanks, Councillor. I have Councillor Hakey, Crowley, Duguay. Councillor Hakey?
Thank you very much,
Well, you
Mr.
did-
Chair, and through you to
Okay.
Mr. Nelson. Excuse me. The reason that I asked about the earlier in this evening is the development charges for education. Has the city asked the Board of Education if they would pay for any of this, or are they obligated to pay for any of this?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Hakey. We did reach out to the school boards, just more so just to get confirmation of support. We did hear back from one of the school boards in which they give indication. We never heard back from the other school board. To speak specifically to your question, they are not obligated to pay for it, and I think it would be a hard sell to get them to pay for it.
Maybe, thank you, Mr. Nelson. Maybe Mr. Potts can tell me, is it in the provincial legislation? Or I'll direct it to whoever can answer it. Is it in the provincial legislation that we are obligated to pay for these in school zones specifically?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
off the top, I have to confirm, but the provisions under the Highway Traffic Act contemplate that it would be a municipal initiative, automated speed enforcement. And I think it reasonably follows that by default, it's a municipal expense.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Crowley and then Parnell. Duguay, Councillor Crowley.
Through you, Mr. Chair, has anyone reached out to, I don't know who can answer this, Peterborough Police Services about enforcement for some of these zones? Or are these community safety zones and school zones going to be strictly enforced by automated speed enforcement?
Through you, yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm going to defer to Mr. Mallon for that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we met with Peterborough Police Traffic Services, and they did make some comments which are in the report. They will be enforcing the Highway Traffic Act. Automated speed enforcement is not yet in Peterborough, so they are supportive to do the enforcement for this project.
Okay. As well, talking about the community safety zones, maybe, I don't know, Mr. Allen or Mr. Nelson, through you, Mr. Chair. For something like Woodglade, would designating it at the entire street right up until Kawartha Heights Boulevard solve a couple of problems in terms of traffic calming by delegating it a community safety zone? I know that I believe on the map, it comes down to partially on Woodglade, I believe, but extending it all the way down to Kawartha Heights Boulevard may solve a couple of problems, possibly, potentially. Is that something that you're thinking?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would be an option that would be available and open to the city. Again, staff did their best to try and employ some level of standardization. The unfortunate part is every school situation, every location has its own unique circumstances. So, in trying to apply those, they did their best to try and be consistent from each section. However, in this circumstance, through that consistency, I believe it got cut off at Sherbrooke Street.
Right.
So there would be the option as a possible extension to that. And looking at that, the recommendation would be is that be an option to look at from a future perspective, in terms of if it was something that would be needed in order to aid in that circumstance,
Okay,
in that specific location.
perfect. Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crowley. Councillor Purnell.
Thank you. Has this report been moved?
It has,
Actually?
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. I'm going to support it. But I did want to just talk about a couple of things with it. And traffic definitely is one of our most challenging issues. We'll highlight a trouble area, which we did earlier this evening. And quite often you can sort of help the problem, but quite often it just shifts the problem to the next road over, depending on what you do. However, in this particular case, I think the effort is critical to do around all of our schools. And that's what this does. It's every single school in the city will have one of these safety zones around it. But that will only work with the enforcement piece, because I can tell you as an example, we have Goodfellow, which is also a highway because we don't have the southern extension. So we have all of that traffic coming from Monaghan Ward through our ward. Quite a lot of it is on Goodfellow, zigzagging towards the Parkway to 115 Lansdowne Street, et cetera, et cetera. And I have 2 schools there. I already have the flashing lights, 40 kilometers an hour, and it is still a speedway. And on that street campaigning, that was the big issue on that street. So enforcement is going to be the key. So I'll support this, but we definitely have to get to that enforcement piece. And anyway, that's all I have to say on that, but it is very important to do, and I will be supporting the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Purnell, for that. Councillor Duguay, LaChica, Mayor Leal, and Baldwin. Councillor Duguay.
Thank you, Chair Beamer. So my understanding, perhaps to Mr. Nelson or Mr. Mallon, 5 school sites have been identified. The pilot, I assume, is going to start in September, approximately. And arising from that, there would be a report coming back to council. It might manifest itself in changes to some of the recommended maps. And I'll use an example. I happen to live on a residential street where the approaches to that school, it's also a bus route for several schools of pickups, which isn't factored into this at all. But the buses approach from 2 different directions using the full length of a residential collector street, as an example. So pilots, we're going to learn, you're going to talk to the communities, you're going to come back to council, and we might see some recommended changes to the maps, the other maps, and or the pilot area maps. That's my first question. Is that possible?
Yes, it is possible. We need to look at how we gain compliance through the road safety measures. We need to look at how driver behavior is changing through the education part. And, once we've got that data together, then we'll come back to council. And if it's necessary to extend or change some zones, that will be part of the recommendation.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, I'm aware that our municipality is receiving several letters from municipalities that are speaking to reduce speed limits and also speaking to the need for FODAR radar, particularly in community zones. Would it be appropriate, to having said that, and I've reviewed many, I think we've all received those. Your worship, if I might, would this be an example, perhaps at an ensuing meeting, a motion from council in support of those measures? Because from my perspective, we can put up all the signs, we can put all the radar warnings we want. The driving behavior hasn't changed necessarily. And what we need is active enforcement together with effective ongoing campaign. So and I have a third question, perhaps to Mr. Freeman. Is there provincial funding forthcoming, or is that the nature of the request of our municipalities across Ontario saying to the province, we need some dough so that we can put up these control features in our municipalities, and the Highway Traffic Act permitting same?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make a comment before I address Councillor Duguay's most latest question, but I'll just remind council that as part of the 2023 capital budget, we did approve $150,000, I believe, for automated speed enforcement feasibility study, and I'm going to kind of look at just Mr. Reyna here as well, because he and I have been chatting about, do we really need to have a feasibility study, or can we just get on with doing something? And I think that's at the heart of what council is getting at with their comments here. So, I'm not sure if Mr. Reyna wants to provide any additional information there or comment, but that's a part of the conversation that we're having at the staff level. There was a 150,000 set aside for red light cameras as well as automated speed enforcement. And what can we do with that? And so we've been having an evolving conversation at the staff level that kind of is along the same lines that you folks are having. Let's just get on with it. So.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Degay. Councillor LaChica.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say how much I support this report and the motion, and appreciate how city staff have been so vigilant to analyze all of these areas and to come up with such a comprehensive plan. The fact that there have been a review of peer cities and just the use of comparatives is really useful, and it just is a reminder that we are aligning with our strategic plan for community health and safety. You know, I have a child that walks every day to Prince of Wales through one of the most treacherous intersections where it's high speeds many days, and I'm with her and I see it happen, and you know, I think it's just such responsiveness to the community with the specific issues that have been raised that city staff have really risen to. So thankful for this report and this opportunity. No, signs won't solve everything, but it's a beginning. And if signs are accompanied with presence and accountability, and if we can afford with what Mr. Freeman has just shared, some photo radar at traffic lights in some of these school zones, then that would be even better. So I also have a question about pedestrian push buttons. Many of them are broken in and around that school intersection where my daughter crosses. I don't know if Mr. Mallon, can you state whether those things are checked regularly for repair? Because if they're not working, that is a safety issue.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. We've received public complaints when they're broken. We don't have a regular maintenance check on them, but as soon as we're notified, they get repaired immediately.
Thank you very much. And just supplemental, I know parents will be thrilled to hear that there is action taken. And why would we wait? It would be great to move beyond the feasibility plan and just get some of this done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor LaChica. I have Mayor Leal, Councillor Baldwin, Burke, and Purnell for a second time. Mayor Leal.
Well, thanks very much, Mr. Chair. And I agree with the sentiment. I think it's time to forget the study, spend the $150,000, buy the technology and get it in place. And it's interesting to see Mr. Mallon here tonight because Mr. Mallon's a veteran of the Traffic Technical Committee. And he just nodded yes. I just want to respond to Councillor Real. And I understand what you're saying. But if you had the Traffic Technical Committee that had the warrants and the criteria, you would make the application that you want a community safety zone put in. The TTC would look at it and then come back and make a recommendation. Folks, it takes the politics out of stop signs, stoplights, you name it. It was a data evidence-based committee and it works extremely well. And I think I'll give Councillor Baldwin, I know he probably wants to talk about this, and Joelle Kovac did a wonderful story from the Police Services Board meeting last Tuesday, but maybe I'll leave it to Councillor Baldwin to talk about the Armadillo Traffic Tracker Collector System.
Thank you, Mayor Leal. Councillor Baldwin.
I wasn't going to talk about the armadillo at all, but I'm glad you brought it up, Your Worship. I think that everything that Ms. Kovac writes is crystal clear. I'm sure I haven't read the article, Your Worship, but I'm sure it's going to be a great read for me this evening. I want to thank staff for the report. As you know, I'm a former teacher principal. Anything that we can do to make our students safer, I would be very much in support. Having said that, I have a couple of questions. I guess through you, Mr. Chair, maybe to Mr. Mallon. Peter, these markings and such that go on the roads. I'm assuming the pilots are going to show that these are required. 12 months from now, we're going to be back here. And subject to budget approval of $625,000 or so, you're going to put all of these markings in all of the schools in the city. My first question is, how long will it take you to put the markings on and get the education prepared for the 5 pilot schools? Can that be done in like a month or 2 months, or can you talk to me about that?
Yes, this program is going to start with the installation of the signposts. Then once they're all installed, we're going to do a fast transition to posting the regulatory speed signs. Once that is complete, which we're thinking is probably going to be in October, we will then start the road safety measures with the pavement markings, driver feedback signs, the vertical delineators. They will be there over the winter. I would imagine we'd want to see at least 6 months to evaluate the effectiveness. Once that's done, we'll see which measures are the most effective so that we can use the correct measure in the right location. And from that, we'll bring a report back to council.
Okay, thank you for that. The second question, I guess it's a budget issue, Mr. Chair, is that, we're going to reduce the speed limits in those safety zones from, I guess the fallback now regularly is 50, but there are some right now that are 40. Could you put, and this may go through you, Mr. Mound, and to Mr. Potts. Could we be proactive and put those signs, those 40-kilometer signs or 30-kilometer signs in every school area, but not necessarily do the pilot, but just put the signs up? How much would it cost to do that? Just put the signs up of speed reduction in every school area and make them de facto safe community areas, but without doing all of the armadillo tracking, which would say how many cars go through there, at what speeds, at what time. Police services could track that for us for sure with the armadillo technology, of which we have 2. But do we know what it would cost to just do where I'm going with this, Peter, is that, buying things in bulk quite often gives us a better price. Could we anticipate this being a positive venture and pre-purchase all of the signs that would be needed, do the pilot project, and have them bought in $2023 rather than $2026, and save us the cost that's going to probably be doubled in 3 years? I know that's a convoluted question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, or I have.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Baldwin, the project is to install all of the regulatory signs throughout the whole city, serving 30 different schools. So that will be a bulk purchase and will be installed right away. We want to do the pilot projects to look at the additional road safety measures to evaluate what's more effective, and that way we might be able to save some money rather than apply something that may not be as effective as we had hoped.
So Peter, thanks for the clarification. I should have read that report a little more carefully. So thank you for that. Because the signs are being purchased and installed, does that mean that the Highway Traffic Act will be enforced in all of those areas then once the signage is up?
For you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Baldwin, absolutely, as part of this report is some bylaw amendments to bylaw the speed changes. Once those bylaws are passed and the signs are installed, the police services may enforce the Highway Traffic Act based on the reduced speeds.
This is a great report. Thank you to Peter and Mr. Nelson and Mr. Reyna. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Councillor Burke, Councillor Burke.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Through you, and thanks to Mr. Nelson, you took a call for me today and really helpfully answered a few questions I had. And I do believe I'm in support of this. I believe that it's very proactive. And I have 3 young children that go to elementary school, and so I witness what is being addressed here firsthand. I had a question, and it was just out of my curiosity because one of the safety concerns that I witnessed that is happening adjacent to this is parking. During COVID, a lot of the school parking lots got, the use got changed with them. And so a lot of people are parking on side streets. And so as a pedestrian or as a mother with a stroller, or as a child, they're entering into traffic through a sea of parked cars during drop off and pickup times. And it's very dangerous. You know, you have kids running out without seeing the road. So I'm wondering if this is a good time to also address parking on the side streets. If I look at all the schools that you have maps of, there's like side streets around them. And I know just in the school that I walk and pick up my kids from, the parking is just a huge unaddressed issue.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Burke. It's definitely something that can be addressed. I think, again, perfectly honest, this was a large body of work for staff. Staff spent a lot of time, a lot of thought, a lot of work went into this. I think to do the sort of citywide review of the parking issues in a similar manner would be almost as equal body of work. However, that being said, it's definitely something that could be looked at. I'm not so certain that we have the resources and the ability to address it right at this time, because again, as part of the approval of this report, there's more continued work that has to move forward, in which staff will be initiating and getting those signs installed and the appropriate other measures put in place to physically enact those changes. Again, the benefit is hopefully we see the immediate change with the speed reductions, which should help with that in itself. But then if there is specific areas, we can definitely start to look at those individual areas and determine should there be no parking restrictions or different parking restrictions implied or imposed to go along with that. Because and as Mr. Mallon, within the report, it spoke to the fact that there may very well have to be some additional parking restrictions to implement some of the other the pilot enhancements that we're talking about for the improved the benefits of ensuring that people get the understanding of the speed reductions and the speed and the community safety zones that are being witnessed and implemented in this circumstance. So
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. I have Councillor Purnell and Duguay both for a second time. Councillor Purnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It does seem that this is a problem that gets worse and worse every year. And I do think it has a lot to do with distracted driving and just strictly volume of traffic. And the parking issue is one of those things that kind of feeds into itself, because a parent will think, well, there's too many cars parked around the school. It's not safe for my child to ride their bike or walk to school. So I will also drive my child to school. And it just builds up and creates a bigger problem. This is all trying to control driver behavior. And that is the heart of this problem. Drivers, cyclists, they need to follow the rules. That means stop at the stop sign. That means stop at the red light and not run through it. And stay off your phones. The police just did a month blitz for distracted driving, and they had 40 in the first week. And it was over 80 in no time at all. I'm looking forward to the final number with 1 month, because I bet you it's 160 if they get 40 in the first month. So they are watching, and there is going to be a number of speeding blitzes over the summer. I'm not telling you where. Nobody will know where. It's going to be random. And the same with the distracted driving. So we all, as drivers, and I'm a driver, have to follow the rules that got us our license in the first place. And that is what I'm begging drivers to do, is just be aware that, and it's not just children that we have to keep safe. We have a lot of seniors in this town who take a little bit longer to cross at the crosswalk, etc. So let's just look out for each other and be a big community. Plus, do all of these important measures around the schools. It's critical that we do so. And again, the enforcement piece, and we'll all learn a little bit of a lesson. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to Mr. Mallon for explaining that, because it is actually quite important. In the report, yes, every single school will have the signs, and the projects are for further possible measures. So we are acting right away in every single school zone. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Purnell. Councillor Duguay, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe in our approved strategic plan, community safety is a priority. So to staff, congratulations. This is long overdue. We consider several of our school locations, they happen to be on semi-major roads. Almost all of them are on collector streets or on some cases on arterial roads that are automatically dealing with competing traffic and volumes of traffic that are moving too quickly. With respect to what will likely be an initial collection of fines because persons traveling a little too quickly, and can we direct the revenues from those fines back to this program vis-a-vis signs, traffic calming measures, or does that just simply go to a general administrative fund? I'm not sure who of staff I can ask this question.
Mr. Potts?
Highway Traffic Act fines are the proceeds of which are shared with the county pursuant to the intermunicipal service agreement. That's delegated authority from the province under the transfer agreement. So they're not city bylaw fines that the city would otherwise retain. I will add a positive note. The province is currently looking at the details of regulations that will implement at some point administrative monetary penalties for automated speed enforcement and red light cameras. And by contrast to the prosecution process, it's far more efficient, and it recognizes that certain offenses shouldn't require the full-blown judicial resources of the Ontario Court of Justice for a determination. Thanks.
Excuse me, that mean, Mr. Chairman, so if we're sharing these revenues with the county, does that mean if there were fines collected, for example, in some of the township school community safety zones, could the city benefit from those revenues?
Mr. Potts?
Presumably, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Duguay. Councillor LaChica, second time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and this will be quick. I'm just reminded as I'm listening to the recent statements, Councillor Parnell, when she was talking about just the school zone and so forth. When the path to school is safer, I think that truly we'll have fewer traffic volume issues, and it will be a beginning to changing behaviors for drivers. And, this is such an important thing. And to Councillor Hakey's point, question about jurisdiction earlier around traffic and speed in school zones, even though that's provincial, the parking piece is certainly something that each school uniquely possesses, and that our community partnerships with our schools, and speaking as an educator for years, every school is unique. And as we continue to talk to our constituents and look at our specific schools and our wards and what their needs are, that is a school jurisdiction when it's the parking lot and what can we do with the parking lot and the side streets. That is very much a discussion that is a community partner discussion. So I'm glad that we can have these discussions. And again, the responsiveness of city staff in providing such a comprehensive report and a plan for the future is really great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Councillor LaChica. Any further comments or questions? All right, moved by Councillor Aiel. We'll take a vote. And that is carried. Thanks, everyone. So we have no notice of motion this evening. Other business, Councillor Purnell, other business?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very quickly, a little bit of background. The Youth Commission had a reboot meeting, our very first inaugural meeting on May 30th. And I was absolutely thrilled that we had 24 community partners attend the Youth Commission. And these are representatives of the many agencies throughout the city who do help youth and offer programming and servicing. So it was really great that they came out. And at our very first meeting, there was unanimous agreement that there are a lot of programs out there and that free recreational activities and what have you. And our two main problems is, getting the word out to our youth that these are available to them. But also it was highlighted that they have difficulty getting to them because they can't, a lot of them don't drive or can't drive. A lot of them are quite busy with school, et cetera, and perhaps after school jobs, but they can't physically get to these services or recreational activities. And so the recommendation supported unanimously by the Youth Commission is that we look to providing complimentary transit for ages 13 to 18. We've already done this for children up to age 12. And now I'm not asking for approval of this right now. All we're asking for with my motion, which I have shared with everybody, although a little bit late getting it to you, sorry. And I couldn't do it last Wednesday, Mr. Chair, at the public budget meeting. Procedurally, I couldn't do it then. The clerk said I could do this tonight. So my motion is that staff prepare a report as part of the budget 2024 package on the feasibility of free transit for youth 13 to 18. So we will get the numbers, and I don't expect it would be a lot. I believe we're talking in the neighborhood of $25,000 for the children in lost revenue. So it might be similar for the youth, but we'll get those exact numbers before we're asked to make a decision. But the buses are already running, and there is available capacity. And if we can help our youth get to all of these recreational activities, get them to their part-time jobs after school, it actually is a barrier for many of our youth, and this could very much help. But we need a report to prove all of that, and we could consider that as part of the budget.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Purnell. So moved by Councillor Purnell. Speakers, Councillor Riel.
To the chair, I mean, we have a transit liaison committee. And certainly, Councillor Purnell highlighted this to both myself and Councillor Duguay. And certainly, I think that's where it belongs instead of a motion here tonight. I think that would be a recommendation that'd be coming back from the transit liaison committee, certainly to look at that. Instead of a motion tonight, it would be a budgetary type of issue, but certainly we've had 2 meetings already. We have another one planned for this week. So I think that's where it belongs in the Transit Liaison Committee. And certainly the recommendations we bring back for transit, and that could be one of them.
Thank you, Councillor Riel. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Purnell, second time.
I think we can do both just to ensure that it is in the budget, and it has been shared with the new transit committee so that they can deliberate it as well. So we have to follow the process for sure, but we definitely want to make sure it gets into this as a report within the budget. So I kind of like it in writing.
Okay, so moved by yep. Okay, any further comments or questions? All right, we'll take a vote. And that is carried. Other business? Motion to adjourn. Councillor Burke. 2-minute recess. Yeah, take your time. 5-minute recess, then council. Don't forget the wave council. Yeah, we'll reconvene in 5 minutes for city council.